Welcome to A Scrap Life, a podcast solely focused on the hustlers, grinders, operators, and business owners who live and breathe the scrap metal industry every day. We are the original recyclers. No suits required, just guts and hard work. Here is your host, Brett Eckhart.
All right, guys, I'm back with another episode of A Scrap Life. You guys know me, man. I'm always on the hunt for hustlers, entrepreneurs, people out there that are just kind of like carving a path and doing their thing the way they want to do it. And I feel like the guy I got on today is a pretty good example of that. So Bob Emery, Metals Recycling Magazine. I won't give you a title since you didn't want to really all the way give yourself a title, so I'm not going to do it to you either. So we've been talking about putting this thing together. We finally got it done. So thanks for taking the time, man, and welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Brett. Appreciate the opportunity to be on your podcast. I've watched it many a times, paid attention to it, love it. Love the way you go about work, and I'm honored to be a guest.
Thank you, man. Like I said, you kind of are who you surround yourself with is kind of the way I've always looked at it. And I have an awesome, team of people that help me do what I do. I can't by no means do it all. Sometimes I don't think I can do any of it. But I get up like everybody else, put my boots on and my jeans, and I just try and go make something happen for the day. So you kind of strike me as that type of individual. So I've been kind of poking at you, trying to get you on the podcast for a while. But for those of you that don't know much about Bob, I'm going to let him kind of give you a little bit of background. Now, my goal is just to pick at him and see what information I can drag out of him. So how do you go from, I was going through your bio, like we were talking earlier, you worked on the advertising marketing side with Emery. You've been around the industry for a while on the equipment side. And so give me a little bit of background on you, Bob.
I actually started in advertising out of college and worked for a local newspaper. And I was there, and within a short amount of time, I really grew the territory. Loved it, liked dealing with people, liked dealing with the public. Just had fun doing it. And I was there for, I think, 4 years out of college, and realized that either if I wanted to make money, I had to go elsewhere, that the people there were lifers. A couple jobs in between, but started with Recycling Today back in 1995. And I know you've had interviews with them and do their show with the Scrap Expo and everything. And they did a great job last year. And in fact, saw your podcast down there as well. But I was with Recycling Today for almost 7 years. Left there to go to Construction Equipment Guide for about a year and a half when Emery came calling. And then when Emery, we were able to strike up a deal, and I had been with them for about 17 and a half years as sales director. And with Emery, I handled basically all the advertising, whether it be in print, digital, for the Scrap magazine, which they're no longer doing, for their Emery membership directory, for their websites, for their news emails, and everything else that they sent out. They decided to go digital in December of 20. So from that perspective, I wasn't exactly sure what I was going to do. I had customers contacting me regularly saying, start up a magazine and we'll support you. And from my perspective, I'm like, guys, it's just not that easy. It just don't.
You don't just fire up a magazine and start sending it all over the world and say, yeah, I'm just. So out of curiosity, what is that? And we'll go back into the story, but what does it take? I mean, like you said, you say it doesn't just, you don't just start up a magazine. Like, there's got to be so many components of putting a magazine together damn near from scratch. I mean, really, you haven't been in the industry, but what does that look like for a guy that like myself who has never lived in that world and doesn't understand? What's that process look like?
It's funny because today so many people like, oh, you don't need a print magazine. You just go digital. You don't even need a magazine. Just do things online. And that's kind of where Emery was heading. There's really a lot that goes into putting together or starting up a magazine. But because of my background, I've basically been in publishing for 30 some years. So from that perspective, I knew what I needed to do. I had to make sure I had the guts to go forward with it.
Yeah.
And two, I had to make sure I had a couple people that would come along that would be able to fill their roles, and they sure have, and it's been phenomenal. So basically, I guess to answer your question,
yeah.
yeah, I had to have a designer up front, somebody who would design the magazine, and there was a lot that went into that because they wanted to talk with me and my editor and find out what we wanted, and they wanted to kind of build it around us. I wanted to make sure if I was able to bring along my production manager from Scrap Magazine from Emery, where I knew that if we could get this, I knew I could handle the sales end of it. I knew I could handle the management end of it, but I'm not a writer. I'm not. I'm not a director. I'm not a production person.
Yeah.
So from that, I really rely heavily. I couldn't have designed the magazine. So the people who I brought along with us to get us going, proofreader Ken Kaiser, the old publisher of Scrap Magazine, came with us to proof the magazine. Marion Weiss, our production director, Ken McEntee, our editor. Everybody has just done a heck of a job and made my job easy. I just manage it. So, but
It kind of reminds me, you know, that process sounds to me, Bob, kind of like the guy that has worked for a couple of different scrap metal recycling companies, and you've kind of seen all the processes, you know, from the office to the production to what it looks like. You've seen behind the curtain, you've kind of done most of the jobs at one point or another. At least you kind of have a feel for what each job entails. And then you're like, fuck it, I'm gonna start my own scrapyard. Like, I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna put my own on. So I think that was the way I understood it. I didn't know all the finite details of it, but the way I understood your story was that way, right? So just the nature of the beast for me, I'm always like looking for individuals like that kind of had the I just use the word courage because I think that's what it is. A lot of people, it's a tough pill to swallow to go from, you know, being employed and understanding that, and, you know, getting a consistent paycheck from a company to saying, okay, I'm gonna go out and put my own money where my mouth is. I'm gonna, you know, make this happen. And I think it takes a lot of guts to do that.
There were a lot of sleepless nights when I made the decision or before I made the decision to go forward. Once I made that decision, I was much more comfortable. I think we stopped publishing Scrap. I stopped getting paid in December of 20, and we started our first magazine in July of 21. And I really didn't, I was looking at it in February and definitely considering it. I think I pulled the trigger April 1st, and it was too soon to do a May issue. But so we targeted July, and, you know, I had borrowed money from my wife to basically start this business. She was all behind me from the beginning. The kids were behind me. I had customers that reached out to me who were like, well, if you don't start a magazine, come to work for us in sales. We want you to work for us. Because I had obviously a lot of contacts both on the equipment and on the scrap dealer side.
Yeah.
And I obviously a heavy background in sales, and I have a very good understanding of the equipment side of things too. I don't know a lot about any one piece of equipment, but I have a general understanding of most everything and how they work in the yard. So from that perspective, I could have done a lot of things. But once I made the decision to go forward, it was a matter of, you know, starting to reach out to let customers know we were going to do it. A lot of people were fairly skeptical up front, and they were like, Bob, if this works, we'll join you. But we're going to give it a little time before we spend our money away. And I knew what my costs were going into it. We made money with issue 1 and never looked back. So
nice. What was the biggest
businesses don't start?
Yeah, what was the biggest challenge for you? Like, what was the biggest maybe challenge that you knew was coming, and what was maybe the biggest like unforeseen challenge that you didn't really see
Probably
coming?
the biggest challenge was really was time deadlines. Being able to put something together, basically starting a business on April 1st is when we officially kind of announced and let people know what we were doing. And we basically had to have an issue together within 2 months because we're usually about a month before. So it was a July, August issue. My deadline was probably June 1st, June 15th at the latest. And so within 2 months, I had to put together a magazine that made a good impression, that read well, that was error-free, that the content was good, and hopefully a few ads in it to make a little money, because because we're not making it on the subscriptions, we're making it on the advertising side of it. So it was the most challenging part probably would have been the deadline constraints of
And did
starting.
you know that going into it? Is that a foreseen challenge? Yeah, the deadline
without,
side.
without a doubt, I mean, it's part of the industry. You go
Yeah.
from issue, as soon as you're done with one, you kind of move on to the next.
Yeah.
Then get into show season and you get behind a little bit because you've been traveling, so you got to work a little harder, and so. But yeah,
what about
it's
unforeseen? Is there anything that kind of caught you off guard that you were like, huh, I didn't really see that one
you know
coming?
what really I guess what really kind of caught me off guard was how much support I had from previous customers and from people that were like, no, Bob, if you're doing it, we're with you.
Oh.
And I mean, I've been in the industry. I was with Emery for over 17 years, but been in this industry for 27 or whatever it was, longer, 29. And I was humbled. I was honored. And I didn't expect that. I mean, I work with people, but they know I care. When I work, I mean,
Yeah.
I work with people. I've got you could have a customer come up and say, Bob, I'm going to spend 10 grand. I'm going to spend it up front. And this is what I'm going to do. And I'm like, don't do it.
Yeah.
Spread it out over the year. You're going to do better with it. It's going to benefit us both. Where a lot of people, salespeople, especially, I'll take the money up front. What are you talking about?
Yeah. 100%.
So I care, and people showed me that they cared back. It was amazing the support we had from customers, and that was unforeseen to me.
You know, one thing, and I met Jim Keefe like probably a couple of years ago, and he had called me up one time. He was coming to town for a mining conference or something. He said, "Hey man, I saw your podcast, listen to some of your stuff. Hey, I'm going to come in town." And I didn't know him from Adam really. I just was like, yeah, you know, I'd love to meet you. And like what I learned from, you know, our conversations and what I learned from, you know, developing a relationship with him and guys like yourself is you guys are probably the most connected people in our industry. Like I never really took that into consideration, that how many people you guys knew just because of the nature of the beast, right? And obviously you say having been with Emery for, was it 17 years? And before that, GIE Media or Recycling Today for, what'd you say,
almost 7 years with them in
almost 7
construction
years?
equipment side, right?
And, you know, I mean, talk about connected people in our industry and, you know, and connecting the dots and who's who in the zoo and, you know, and what's going on. I feel like between yourself and Jim, like you guys probably know and know of more people in the recycling industry, whether it's scrap or wood waste or fiber or plastic. I mean, I'd put you guys up probably against anybody on that side.
It was pretty interesting because being with Emery, it's I would bring a lot of businesses into the association from outside the business. Meaning, I do a ton of shows outside of scrap. So I would do shows like Demolition. I would do shows like Con Expo, the biggest construction show, the Automotive Recycler Show. I would do Iron and Steel. I would do all these other trade shows, and people go, "Oh, there is an association for scrap, or isn't that the Emery? You know, don't you have a show?" I would bring so many people in from the outside because of the knowledge I had. I'd be able to look at a piece of equipment or something on somebody's booth and say, do you actually market that for the scrap industry? Well, no, but I do have a customer or two. Is there a benefit, do you think? I go, oh, hell yeah. You know, I mean, I'd look at it, and next thing you know, they'd come up and go, oh my gosh, thank you so much. We didn't know. They'd come and join the association, and they do shows or meetings, and they do all kinds of business, and I get, you know, accolades for it. So it's kind of cool.
Did you know, I mean, when you're doing that, I mean, obviously when you're with Emery, you were part of Scrap magazine. And I remember, I remember that magazine. I'm just kind of a junkie that way, I guess. Like part of the reason why I do this podcast and whatever else is, you know, I do some other businesses, but I mean, there is a kind of a fondness, like a first love, if you will, you know, to the scrap side of our business. And when you went from the construction magazine to Emery, was Emery putting out a scrap magazine at that time?
Yeah, they were. In fact, there was a point where Scrap Magazine it was the Bible. It was so big, it was so thick. Jim Fowler was publisher for I don't know how many years, but actually, when I worked with Recycling Today, I went up against Jim Fowler, and you had to be really careful in the way you tried to get business away from scrap because there were two salespeople for Recycling Today at the time, and you better not badmouth Jim, or you better not say it. And you couldn't. He was such a great guy, and what he did with that magazine, he'd look at a scrap dealer and say, "You are going to advertise with us, right? With Emery, right?" And oh yes, sir. And so.
So he kind of had the double-edged sword. He kind of had to yeah, just so you know.
Oh yeah, everybody knew Jim, and Jim was publisher, but he was also handled the sales, and like I said, he did a great job. So when we were with Recycling Today, we would tactfully go after the accounts and try and pick up business and grow, and we were very successful at it. There was a time when then Jim left, and as soon as Jim left, we started cleaning up.
Yeah.
We were picking up all kinds of business with Recycling Today. The publisher at the time was really only there about 4 years. And I had left Recycling Today. I don't even remember when it was. It was actually December 11th was the day I gave my 2-week notice before everything hit.
Mm-hmm.
And when I came on board with Scrap Magazine, it was down to like 60 pages an issue or something, where it was probably averaging 200 or 180 or something.
Yeah.
But when I started, we started growing right away. It was the same thing. We grew and never looked back, and we kind of plateaued out. Emery made the decision to go
That was going to be my next question.
Yeah.
Was what prompted that decision by Emery to move off of the print side? And
I don't know if I can really answer that. The only thing I can really say is that we had a magazine that probably averaged 130 pages, 140 pages per issue when they decided to go away with it. From that perspective, they had a group there that wanted to go digital, and which is fine. I've got no issues with that. But I had been pushing to do things differently digitally with the magazine for years, but they didn't want to put money into it.
yeah.
So from that perspective, that's what they decided not to go forward with worked out best for me, because then when I decided to do our own magazine, Metals Recycling, I knew I wanted a print magazine, and I'll explain why in a minute. But I also had to make sure that we had a digital version, and not just a flip book. We'll be making some more changes in the future as well, but that I was able to incorporate video into the magazine as well. Gotcha. So that we could actually, we've got the podcast feature coming up in the Emery convention issue. I could have Scrap Light playing when you flip the page over to that feature in place of your picture, and it could autoplay. It would start right up. It's very cool, some of the things that we're doing with the magazine. It's so easy to do. It's cost effective, and it's something that I didn't have the green light on before, and now I make a decision. If I make a good one, it's good. If I don't, it's my fault. My kids all think I'm an ass, but my boss is an ass, and that's me. So yeah. They're like, "Oh, he's so hard to work for." Yeah, but
so your kids are in the business then?
No, they aren't. They just love to razz dad. I got twin boys that are 25 this month, and my daughter's 26.
Okay, so you got 3 kids.
Yeah, 3 kids. Right. I mean, you've got 2, I think.
I got 2 boys. Yeah, they're a handful, but I wouldn't have it any other way.
Oh, without a doubt. And I'm glad to see. I know family means a lot to you too. I see the pictures from the trip and the photos from the trip, and saw the picture the other day, and I think I noted that your son is almost as tall as you now. You're older.
Man, I tell you what, I kind of debate. There's a lot of ways to skin the cat on like what you're willing to post on social media and what you're not. Some people, I don't want to, post my family, or I do, or this or that, and part of me, I told myself, I was always anti-Facebook, I didn't like people even taking my pictures. I just didn't like. My wife was like, "Let's do fan pictures." I'm like, "No, I'm not doing it." And I just didn't really like it. And Sako was working on me years ago to try and get me to do a first podcast. And I was like, he had just started up his pile of scrap. And I was like, no,
Right.
I'm good. I don't want to do it. I go tell somebody else. He's like, no, bro, you have a good story. You tell a story. So I did it. And then I bought a pipe company in Indiana, and I was like, man, that podcast deal is pretty good. So I was like, it wasn't bad. So then I started my own podcast. My first podcast had nothing to do with scrap. It had everything to do with I was trying to learn the reline business of pipe, reline corrugated steel pipe. So I started this podcast called Reline Unknown, which means I'm new to the industry. I bought a company in this industry. I'm just trying to figure it out with the rest of you, right? It was a very new industry. So, long story short, that was my first podcast. And I started getting more comfortable with talking to people and being in front of a camera and whatever else. And then I was like, I ended up selling that. I ended up selling that business. I still own a portion of it. I have a gal that runs it and owns a big chunk of it now. But I was like, I'm gonna do a podcast about like what I really know, like what I really am passionate about. And it was about scrap and about my life in general. And I said, okay, I'm just gonna be very genuine about who I am. Like I am what I am. Like I'm not gonna pull any punches. And because I'm not worried about sponsors, I'm just gonna do it the way I do it, right? And so part of it is I am, a family guy. I'm a family business guy. I'm a third generation. So I'm like, fuck it. I'm gonna post. If I want to post a picture of my family, I'm gonna post it. I'm not gonna think twice. I'm like, this is me. I do what I do, but I'm pretty family oriented, and so I was, I know a lot of people decide, do I go down that road? Do I not? And I'm just like, the genuinely me. I'm just gonna do it, and if I don't like Bud Light for making some dumb marketing move, like I'm just gonna call it out. Like I think it's a shitty beer and I wouldn't buy it, but hey, like if you like it, by all means, go drink the hell out of it. Like that's just me.
I was outside the Indians game the other day and they had Budweiser and I almost got one and I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't. I'll drink some. And I picked a beer I don't even drink.
Yeah,
But I'm like, I can't support Anheuser-Busch right now.
I
It's like,
know. Yeah. And
yeah,
you vote with your dollars, you vote with your comments, you vote with, and I don't want to tell anybody else how to live their life. I'm
right.
just saying, like, this is me. Either you like me or you don't, but like I don't want to, I'm not here to, be super political or anything like that. I just if I see something, I read something and I'm like, here it is. But going back to on the marketing side and deciding for a magazine to decide we're going to go digital. Is there a cost cutting component to that, or is it just, hey, this is the direction we see the future, and we're going to move that way and try and be a first mover, or is it a combination, or I mean, how do you see that?
It's funny because there's definitely a cost savings component of going digital, but our industry is so diverse. And I know you're third generation scrap. I mean,
Yeah,
the way you will go about the digital, there's a couple people who do what you do and do it so well. And I love your posts. I love the way you go about things. But for a magazine, so many times you get, if you're doing a story, once it's there, it's gone. It's not right in front of you again.
yeah.
Um, from a cost perspective, our printing and mailing for this issue, for what will be our ISRI convention issue, I think probably $40,000 just to print and mail the magazine.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a cost savings to go digital over producing a printed and digital magazine. The digital side costs hardly anything to put together when you look at it. Even adding video, anything we do. To me, that's gravy. I produce a printed magazine with a digital supplement. I think we send out about 10,500 printed magazines. I email out about 6,000 more, and every issue is hosted on the website. And the funny thing is, for people who subscribe on the website, you've got the option of going print, digital, or both. And if you add together both print only or print and digital, I'm at 82% direct. That still includes print.
Yeah.
So there's still demand out there. And what I was talking about, the generational, is you've got a lot of people. I'm an old guy. Look at the gray beard, that kind of stuff. I do enjoy a printed magazine, but I like the digital too. I'll flip through both, but I like to put my hands on it. I travel a lot. So if I'm on a plane, I'll grab the magazine, flip through it, read it, do whatever. You see them in showrooms at scrap or in waiting rooms at a scrap yard, lunchrooms, break rooms, that kind of stuff. Other places they end up. But yeah, there's still a need for a printed magazine in this industry. If you were in a legal profession or a financial or medical, there's so many different industries where digital you can go forward and everybody's on board. But in our industry, a lot of people still get their hands dirty, and a lot of those people are the ones that have decision making processes in our industry. A shop foreman, an operations supervisor. You don't have time to be on this while you're working, but you take a break, you may find you're in the lunchroom and flipping through it, and so it's just a whole different. It's a different animal. So.
Yeah, I always try and look through things from a lens of my kids. This is how I balance it out in my own mind is I think about my dad and I think about my kids. And obviously I sit in between. And I'm I'm an and person, right? I like and versus say, the word or. And I heard it said, to Gary V one time, and who's a really great marketing guy. And he's like, you don't have to pick one lane, like, especially when it comes to stuff like that. And I really thoroughly, like, I don't really read anything digital. Even my books, like when I travel, I bring a real book, right? That's just the way I am. Now, my youngest son and my oldest boy, they're big book. They read a lot of books but they read the hard. Nobody has a Kindle or anything in our house, but I shouldn't. My son's not here, so his birthday's in like a couple weeks, and I got him a Kindle because he's a voracious reader. But I want him to be able to travel a little bit with less shit. But but I read everything in a magazine, like or a book, and that's just me. My dad, he's probably similar. He reads stuff in a book. My kids, they could probably go either way. So I don't feel like that transition has all the way happened as fast as people think it's going to happen, right? And I think when you anticipate a technology moving faster than it actually does, and I think of, like, for example, the electric car, right? Everybody's in a hurry to bet on lithium, in a hurry to bet on this, in a hurry to bet on how fast this electric car transformation is going to happen. I think if you take a few steps back and just look at the evolution, like, technology eventually does win. There is no doubt. Technology wins all day, twice on Sunday. You can bet your ass, right?
Very true.
But I don't think it wins as fast as a lot of people anticipate it winning. And I think that in any business, and if I'm wrong about yours, then then tell me, because I'm often wrong. It feels like there's a lot of money that can be left on the table when you exit too early because you anticipate it, technology just developing everything really quickly. And I think that it does take a little more time than people think. What are your thoughts?
I knew what we brought in from a revenue perspective with Emery. I know they're nowhere near that electronically today. We were, as I mentioned, we've been around since it was July of 21 was our first issue. We published 6 per year, and we've done nothing but grow since we started. This one here is our convention issue. We're 108 pages, and we're a new magazine. I basically started with $0 when we started the business, and that's kind of scary, knowing you've got to have X amount to cover your nut before you even turn a profit. So we were 108 pages, and that was in the midst of all the personal issues I've had with I'm leaving for demolition and find out my mom broke her hip. I thought it was my wife calling at 8 o'clock or 7 o'clock in the morning on my way to the airport to say she loves me. It's not. It's mom she broke her hip and she's going in for surgery.
Yeah.
So the next thing I know, it goes from surgery to rehab to hospice to funeral, and that's all through in the convention issue. I could have been 150 pages for this issue. It just, if I was around, thank God my staff is incredible. Everybody picked up the pieces while I was busy taking care of the items that I needed to do, the family matters. And I'm very fortunate where we're at, but I mean, that I won't tell you what we're billing, but it's a lot of money that is,
Yeah.
a lot of money to be made, still in print. And in this case, it's print and digital. But yes, I would have to, not knowing what other people's revenues are, we're doing great as a new business.
I love it.
So,
I love it. So the decision was good to you're
oh,
happy with your decision.
I sleep a lot better than I did in February and March of 2021.
Was there a lot
But I
of
decided,
pressure? Was there a lot of pressure on that first issue? Did you feel a lot of, I mean, obviously timeline and whatnot, but I mean, was that first issue where you're like, because like the old saying, you get one chance to, make a first impression. And so you try to make a good one. Did you feel that going into it?
to a degree, I mean, I knew we did have to make a good impression, but I knew we would continue to evolve. And I mean, I even wrote in the first issue, which again, I'm not somebody who will do that. It's not my forte. I'm good talking to people. I'm very comfortable with different types of people. Selling the magazine, you know, I wrote in the first one basically saying, welcome to the magazine. Here it is. A lot of experience behind us. We're looking forward to covering the industry, and hopefully you'll never hear from me again. It's
Yeah.
basically what it was. But when we started with the second issue, my editor's wife passed away due to COVID. And he basically said, I told him, he basically said, I don't think I can do this. And I was like, you take care of what you need to do. I'll
Yeah.
take care of the magazine. I'll make sure. So fortunately at the time, my old publisher, Kent Kaiser, stepped up and said, Bob, don't worry about it. I'll take care of the editorial for this issue. You just make sure we're on track with sales. I had to write another column in the second issue that basically said, okay, I said I wasn't going to write anymore, but sometimes you need to do things that are unplanned that you don't expect to do.
Yeah.
And here I am. And without saying what happened, is it's basically life comes at you fast, and be ready to adapt. And we grew with the second issue, and Ken came back for the third one, and we were back on track and continuing to grow ever since. But so we had some pretty tough obstacles. But to answer your question, yeah, we had to make a good impression, but I knew we'd evolve and get better.
Okay. Because I always wondered, like, with that first one, if you feel that pressure, anytime you open a new business, you have the grand opening, you're like, okay, like I want to then go off without a hitch, even though in the back of your mind, just because I've opened enough to know
Right. I
that,
see.
that if you feel like you're gonna get through without a hitch, you're crazy.
Yeah. Well, like I said, we had hitches, but you know what? It's fun too. There's an excitement about starting something new, about the nervousness that you have, that you overcome. And like I said, to turn a profit out of issue one, and not only that, to pay back loans and everything else right off the bat, it was very cool. So
What do you enjoy the most about, about putting out that magazine, putting out your magazine? I mean, what is that? What do you get the most enjoyment, fulfillment out of on a daily basis?
yeah, realistically, it's probably to do it the way I want to do it.
Okay.
To be in charge, to and it's not that I'm a control freak or anything of the sort. I'm far from it. I want people to do what they want to do. I want, if they're qualified, to go forward, and if I think it reads well and does well, we go with it. So I love having the decision making ability, but ultimately to control our expenses. I mean, I spend a lot of money on this to get it to grow, whether it's bonus
Mm-hmm.
distribution, whether it's like better stock, whether it's fine glossy, this, that, whatever. I can make that decision, where in the past it's like, well, it costs money to do that. It's like, we want to produce a good product, you got to spend money to make money. And so I've gone forward with, I was supposed to be at Con Expo. It's the first Con Expo I've missed since 1998.
I saw
Every
it like
3 years.
25 years, right?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
saw that.
So, but I had friends that I sent 3,000 magazines out to Con Expo for both the booth and the bins. And then I never made it out there because of the funeral and everything. But I had people step up. It's cool to run a business. And some people go, you're going to spend that much money to ship magazines cross country and overnight them, or yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It'll pay dividends. It'll make us grow in the long run. So
there's a certain amount of pride in being able to make that decision. And I've kind of noticed this, like I'm a competitive guy when it comes to work. I'm outside of work, I'm other than like when I'm coaching my kids' sports or like even watching them play sports, like I am competitive. Like I'm not gonna sit here and bullshit you and tell you I ain't. But
Right.
but when I'm at work, like there's a certain amount of just pride in being able to put your stamp of approval on something, right? And saying like that's mine, that's how I did it. And it may not be the way you would do it, but it's the way I like to do it, type of deal. And I often think like if you can't start it yourself, and this is just my read on you. I feel like you and I have a similar qualities. I hate to give myself a title. Like I'm here to remove everybody's obstacles. I used to call myself the chief obstacle remover. Like I'm just here to clean the slate for people to do so they can run it the way they want it, right? And then I get to come back and say, yeah, like that's I like it. I like where you're going with that, right? But like just like you, like I'm here to move obstacles so you can get after it. And I feel like you kind of have a similar mindset when you're the way you run your magazine. Is that true?
Yeah, oh, without a doubt, without a doubt. I strongly believe in the staff we have. Like I know I mentioned a few people. I was very fortunate to bring on a couple writers for us. That Manfred Beck. I don't know if you know Manfred or have read anything from him, but he started Recycling International, and he was very beneficial when we started too. Just give me ideas. He submitted a story for the first issue. Bob, don't worry about it. Don't pay me. Do whatever. Long and short, we're running his columns in our magazine. Judy Ferraro, who is with Scrap, um, she's writing for us. Love what she does. The cool thing is, I have people come up at shows and say, "Bob, we love what you're doing. We love the content. You know, we love that you started a business." But people say, "I've got scrap guys who advertise, who'll come up and say, they're thanking me for spending money with me because they're getting business from their ads that they're running." And I'm
Yeah.
like, I should be thanking you. And they're like, no, trust me, it's paying for itself. I had
Yeah.
a customer come up to me at St. Louis at the Israel Consumers Night and said, he goes, "You'll enjoy hearing this. I had somebody call me today and said, do I ship the stainless to the address that's in the ad?" He goes, "You're the only place we advertise." And it's a truckload of stainless coming.
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool.
That's
Um,
cool.
it's
That's
yeah,
those
it's
win-win
very,
situations what make it
yeah,
worthwhile.
very rewarding.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really cool. I'm totally enjoying it, and
So moving forward, I mean, I think of recycling today and Jim Keith and that at GIE Media and
right.
um, and that's like a full-on media company, right? I mean, they're putting on events, they're doing, they have obviously the magazine and the multiple magazines and kind of multiple business lines. Uh,
Mhm.
what do you, is there a next step for you, or do you feel like, doing what you're doing right now is kind of your sweet spot and you're really enjoying it?
You know what? At this point, I've had other people say, "Well, what's your next venture?" It's like that's not happening. I'm getting older.
Uh-huh.
Like I said, I did this more out of necessity. It was like either I'm going to go to work selling equipment for somebody
Yeah.
uh, in the scrap industry because I have so many contacts, or I'll start a magazine. And I just had to make a fairly quick decision as to what to do. When I worked at Recycling Today or GIE Media, it was basically they really didn't have any meetings when I first started there. So they had three publications at the time, and then they started branching out into hosting meetings and stuff. And now with Scrap Expo, which was very excellently done last year,
Yeah.
they've grown quite a bit on the event side of things. For me, right now, this is what I'm going to do. We may have an addition in this, or a couple things down the road. But if it's anything, it'll only be tied to recycling and to scrap.
Gotcha.
Even with me, when we were even the name that came across when we did metals recycling, that was a tough decision because I'm limiting myself. If I'm materials recycling, and I knew some of the things that were going on within Israel and wanting to broaden out over the years. They've been wanting to handle more materials and let people know they're there for everybody. We
Yeah.
used to get a little bit of griping from the metals guys, like, "Oh, you're spending too much time on paper, too much time on plastic or rubber or electronics or this or that." And so I was very concentrated, very decisive about going forward with just metals recycling. I knew we would lose some business, but I didn't need all that other business.
Yeah.
And from that perspective, I'm happy doing what I'm doing right now. We'll continue to grow. I think we're up 24% this year over last year. And that includes and last year was a good year.
Yeah.
And then the delays I had early this year with the family issues. So yeah, we're doing great. Something may change down the road, but another addition or product or something. But right now we're good with what we're at.
You know, I've heard it said, and I'm a big podcast junkie, like listening to other people's podcasts and just kind of, and somebody was saying, and I can't remember which one, but they were talking about niche business moving forward, and because it gets hyper competitive in anything you do, right? And so, I was talking about even when I started my podcast, I was like, I'm just gonna do like scrap metal, scrap whatever, right? Like scrap stories, anybody in the industry. And I feel like there is a big opportunity in business in general, whether it's publishing or whatever, is to find that niche and just be really good at a niche, right? And just be good at one thing, really good at that, and then just see what opens up down the road. But I feel like by even naming the magazine Metals Recycling, you're pretty much saying, like, if you're paper, if you're fiber, if you're whatever, then maybe we're not the best advertising forum for you right now. But so many companies anymore, they don't just do fiber.
Right.
They don't just do metal. They don't just now, so there is I feel like there is, just an opportunity in being that niche, because a guy that maybe is in the fiber business, he'll read Metals Recycling magazine because he might do 500 or 1,000 ton a month just in happenstance, and kind of wants to stay involved in the industry and pay attention without necessarily, digging much harder.
Yeah. I totally agree.
So the Scrap Expo, you said that Jim, they did a good job down at Louisville, and I agree. I enjoyed that expo. I felt like it was built for the small and medium size recycling companies. And Emery, I feel, because it is a national, international organization, they cater a little bit more to the bigger companies. But both are important, right? I mean, you got to have both in this industry. The mom and pops have to have a place to sell the material, right? And the bigger companies have to have a place for, people out there collecting it and processing it and getting it ready. And that's just my, layman's point of view. What is the difference when you look at coming up on, the Emery event here in a week, and then in Louisville in September? What do you see as the differences, positives, negatives, whatever, in the two events?
It's funny because I go back to 95 in this industry. So I know virtually most any scrap show or recycling show that has taken place since I started in the industry. I used to almost kind of put together a list of shows for people who were new to the industry, whether they be scrap dealers or whether they were equipment people. And I used to put together like ballpark numbers and where it was held, whether they had an exhibitor component or not. So I'm very well versed in shows both within the industry and outside the industry. And that's why I said I brought a lot of people in. Now, looking at Emery, I totally agree with your assessment. It's obviously a very large show. It's nothing at all like the Scrap Expo show from a perspective of size. I mean, anybody who's anybody as far as offering equipment is at the show. And this year in Nashville, it should be record-breaking attendance, and there's a lot of reasons for that. Having said that, Emery has a lot of regional meetings throughout the year that I go to many of them, whether there's an exhibitor component or not. And that's one of the things that I don't think everybody always understands. A lot of people will go to the national show, but a lot of times you can do more business at a regional meeting than you can at a national show, because you like, I know you'll be in Nashville. You'll be there. You'll be a rock star. People will come walking up. They'll want their selfie with you from
Yeah, I don't know.
From your podcast and everything. I mean, you really are.
I'll
You
go
walk,
there and just wear my America hat. Like, all right,
everybody knows you.
America.
But you can go to those shows, but there's a lot of businesses, smaller businesses, that can't leave their business for a week or for 5 days. But if the meeting is going on in Dallas and I'm in Texas and I'm 2 hours away, yeah, I'll go for a weekend show, or I'll go for a two day meeting with an Emery Gulf Coast, or a Emery Southeast show, or an Empire chapter. And I attend a lot of those meetings, especially if there's an exhibitor component. Emery National is a whole different bird, and it's a great show. A lot of business. Emery's unique from a perspective of, there's business that's done on the show floor where some of those are prearranged, some are not. People will come up and look at a machine and say, yeah, I want to buy that. Let's get down to brass tacks, or let's knock out a number.
Yeah.
Where I've been doing shows for years, you wouldn't get that at so many other shows where people come at Emery to buy. They may dicker a little on the price, but yeah, they're ready because they don't want to screw with it again. When they go back to work, they got to deal with the employee issues. I've got a shipping issue. I've got rail and shipping same, but there's so many other things that come into play. Prices just went up. They just went down. There's so many other things that are involved in running your business. When Jim did the Scrap Expo last year, he did it also. There was the same time as the Emery Commodity Roundtables, and there were people like you. I don't know if you went to Chicago. I know there were
I screwed up to Chicago just because I was so close, and I'm like,
right.
It didn't cost me a lot to go up there for a day. I got a really good buddy up there, so I just went up there and kind of said hi.
It was great Jim did a great job with that show. It was really good to see the operation. I mean, having the equipment being operated, and that's something that really, there's other industries who've done it, but not really in our industry. I mean, Emery to a degree will have some limited separation on the show floor with like any Erie's magnetics or some of the other operational equipment. But you were able to go outside and see the torching, and see the cutting, the baling, the lift trucks, everything that was out there. It was neat to see. You did a great job with it. But if it wasn't for the roundtable meetings, it probably would have been double in attendance last year. This year, knowing their different dates, there's no reason why that show shouldn't be double, triple what it was last year from both an attendance and an exhibitor perspective, including me. I'll have a booth there where last year I had magazines there, but this year I'll have a booth. Yeah. So, like I said, I'm looking forward to it. He did a nice job with it last year. I think that show's going to grow, and there was a need for it. And people at Emery had asked for something like that for a long time, but
yeah, well, it goes back to, like, I feel like if there's a will, there's a way type of deal. And you had the will to create the magazine because you saw an opportunity, just like Jim had the will to create that show because he saw an opportunity that wasn't being met. And or by Emery folding up Scrap Magazine, that created a void or a potential opportunity. So you're like, hey, now's the time, to go after it. And I think that's what business is about. That's what entrepreneurship is about. It's looking around. You may operate, you may work, quote unquote, for somebody else for 30 years, and then you see an opportunity opens up, and you're like, that's the one. Like, I'm gonna go at it, right? And maybe it's a forced opportunity in your case, like where it's like I'm kind of forced my hand a little bit, right? But it's still an opportunity nonetheless. And I look at I look at it as, when you're talking about me going to Emery, and there was a point, and I have nothing to sell really. I'm in this scrap business. I got some couple yards in Idaho, and I'm just a regional player. I do what I do. The only thing I'm selling to people is look for the opportunities, recognize them, and don't be afraid to go after them, right? And I didn't know shit about podcasting. There's a lot of shit I don't know a lot about, but I just was like, hey, I want to build my business, and I want to build a better network. And I think Emery for the longest time was about building a network. Like, that was what they sold you on. You join our trade association, we'll help you network, whether it's regional or on a national level through these events, right? Well, I think when that was going on, even that was before social media, before podcasting, before all these other opportunities. So I mean, if you want to spend the money and go to Emery, it's a cool show, whether it's in Vegas or Nashville or whatever. It's cool to see the equipment, but there is a ton of opportunity for people if they just are willing to build their own network and put themselves out there a little bit. Tell their story about their business, look for an opportunity to grow. And I truly believe that you don't necessarily need to be part of an association to build a network. Can it help? Yeah, if you're not on the marketing end, or you're not strong that way or whatever, like for sure. But use those events for what they are. A good opportunity to see people, shake some hands, give your business an opportunity to sell to somebody else. See who's out there, see who's buying, see who's presenting you an opportunity to maybe advertise what you're trying to buy in a magazine or whatever the case may be. Like, I think that's the good thing about the shows. The downside is, god damn, they're expensive.
Yeah, I totally agree. But as I said earlier, you need to spend money to make money, and I did more business at the demolition show this year than I've done probably at any show ever. And I was in my booth. I'm never in my booth. I mean, I'm always out working the exhibitors and Bob, get away from me. One of those things. And kiddingly.
Yeah,
but
100%.
They're expensive to do, but unbelievable. The opportunities that are out there, whether it be walking a show floor, having a booth, going to the functions at night. I mean, there's so many opportunities to grow your name, to grow your business, to grow anything at trade shows, and the opportunities are there. Take advantage of them.
I'm an advocate for the small, medium-sized operators. I want to show people it can be done. The national guys, like I said, they have their place. The national show has its place. I'm an advocate for the small, medium-sized guys that are out there hustling it up. Bob, you're one of them. And I just, I got a tremendous amount of respect for you. I got a tremendous amount of respect for guys that chase something and go after and are willing to kind of put their money and their time where their mouth is. And so you got my respect, man. Any parting words for the scrap industry and you'd like to put out there? The floor is yours, and then we'll close her down.
The only real parting words is, if you're going to be in Nashville, look for me. I'll look for you. I'm looking forward to seeing everybody there. Brett, I appreciate this opportunity. I respect you. I respect everything you've done from a business perspective, of not just following in what your father did, but you've grown in other businesses that most scrapyards wouldn't even think of. Your converter reclaim, taking converters from all around the country. I love the way you go about things, and I like the way you represent yourself. And again, I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Thank you, man. I always say steel sharpens steel, right? So put yourself on steel, man, and you'll be sharp. So thank you again, Bob. And everybody go check out Bob. Go talk to Bob at the Emery National if you make it. If not, he's going to be at some of the regionals, and then it sounds like he'll be down in Louisville in September. So looking forward to seeing everybody there. Take care.